The Anderson family dining room had always intimidated me. Crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's cars, artwork that required insurance policies, and a table that could seat 20 people comfortably. Tonight it seated 12. My parents, my 3 siblings with their spouses, and me. The odd one out as always. "So, Emma," my brother Marcus began, swirling his wine in a way that made him look like he was trying too hard. "Still doing that little tech thing in Seattle?" I smiled politely, cutting into my overpriced steak. "Yes, still in Seattle. My company's doing well." "Company?" my sister Victoria snorted. She'd been drinking since before dinner. "You mean that app thing? What does it even do?" "We develop AI solutions for financial forecasting," I explained, keeping my voice even. I'd learned years ago that showing emotion in this family was like showing blood to sharks. "Sounds complicated," my mother said in that tone that meant she thought it was anything but impressive. Patricia Anderson had perfected the art of the dismissive compliment. "How sweet that you're keeping busy." My father, Richard Anderson, barely looked up from his phone. "Speaking of business, I have an announcement." He set his phone down with the gravity of someone about to declare war. "Anderson Holdings is expanding. We're acquiring 3 new properties in the downtown corridor. Total investment, $40 million. The table erupted in congratulations. Marcus raised his glass. "That's incredible, Dad. You're a genius." "We're so proud," Victoria added, though I noticed she was already checking her own phone. My younger brother, Thomas, leaned forward. "Does this mean promotions?" "I've been running the residential division for 2 years now." "We'll discuss it," Dad said, which was his way of saying yes without committing. "This expansion will cement Anderson Holdings as the premier real estate development firm in the region. Maybe the entire Pacific Northwest." I took a sip of water. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "The financing is tricky though," Dad continued. "We're leveraging significant capital. But the returns will be substantial." Mom patted his hand. "You always make it work, darling." I set down my fork carefully. "If you need additional funding, I could help." The table went silent. Not the thoughtful, considering kind of silence. The shocked, "Did she really just say that kind of silence?" Victoria laughed first. "I'm sorry, what?" "I said I could help with funding," I repeated calmly. "I have some capital available. I could invest $300,000. The silence turned into barely suppressed laughter. $300,000? Marcus said it like I'd offered to pay for dinner with Monopoly money. "Emma, this is a $40 million deal. Your contribution wouldn't even cover the legal fees." "It's sweet that you want to help," Mom said with that same patronizing tone. "But this is serious business, honey. Not something you understand." My father finally looked directly at me. "Emma, I appreciate the gesture. Really. But we don't need your pocket change." He said pocket change like it physically hurt him. "This is a $40 million business. We work with serious investors. Institutional money. Not." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Not what?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Not hobbyist money from a tech startup that probably operates out of a coffee shop," Victoria finished for him. She'd never forgiven me for skipping her destination wedding to close a crucial deal. "No offense, Emma, but you're playing in the kiddie pool. We're in the ocean." Thomas tried to be diplomatic. "What Victoria means is that our funding structure is complex. We have established relationships with venture capital firms, private equity groups, institutional investors. It's not really something where individual contributions make sense. Unless those individual contributions are 8 or 9 figures," Marcus added with a smirk. "You got $100 million lying around, Emma?" More laughter. My sister-in-law, Jennifer, actually wiped tears from her eyes. I pulled out my phone. "Oh, are we boring you?" Victoria snapped. "Is your little app sending you notifications?" "Just need to send a quick message," I said, typing carefully. "Please excuse me." The message was simple. "David, withdraw all backing from Anderson Holdings effective immediately. Authorization code, Emma 7734. Execute after their 7 p.m. board meeting begins." I hit send and set my phone face down on the table. "As I was saying," Dad continued, clearly annoyed by my phone usage, "this expansion represents the culmination of 30 years of building this business. 30 years of relationships, reputation, and results. It's not something you can just buy into with a check. Even a $300,000 check, Mom added as if that clinched it. I understand, I said quietly. Do you though? Victoria leaned forward. Because you seem to think that whatever you're doing in Seattle puts you on our level. It doesn't. You make apps. We build empires. Victoria, Thomas said weakly. No, let me finish. Victoria was on a roll now, emboldened by wine and the approval she saw in our parents' eyes. Emma has always been like this. Always trying to insert herself where she doesn't belong. Remember when she wanted to join the company after college? Thank God Dad said no. I did remember. I'd graduated top of my class from Wharton with a degree in finance. My father had told me that Anderson Holdings was a family business, and that I needed to find my own way. Marcus, who'd barely graduated from a state school, had been given a VP position immediately. I found my own way, I said. Yes, you did, Mom said using her let's move on voice. And we're happy for you. But this conversation is about serious capital investment, and frankly, it's above your pay grade. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. A text from David Chin, my investment manager. Confirmed. Withdrawing $180 million from Anderson Holdings. Board meeting starts in 8 minutes. They don't know yet. I took another sip of water. The best part, Dad was saying, is that our primary backer just increased their commitment. Another $50 million available if we need it. When you have the reputation we've built, money finds you. Who's the primary backer? Jennifer asked. Dad smiled mysteriously. Confidential. But they're a major player. Very sophisticated operation. They've been with us for 5 years now, and they keep increasing their position because they see our value. 5 years. That was exactly when I'd started investing in Anderson Holdings through shell companies and investment firms. They had no idea. Must be nice to have that kind of support, I said. It is, Dad agreed. That's what happens when you operate at a certain level. You attract serious money. My phone buzzed again. David, board meeting starting. Your father just walked in. This is going to be interesting. I glanced at my watch. 7:02 p.m. Is something wrong? Mom asked, noticing my attention to the time. No, nothing at all. Dad's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, and declined the call. Where were we? The expansion, Marcus prompted. Dad's phone rang again. Same number. He declined it again, more irritated now. Maybe you should get that, I suggested. It's fine. They'll leave a message. He started to speak again, but his phone immediately rang a third time. For God's sake. He answered it. This better be important, I'm at a family dinner. We all watched as his face changed. The irritation melted into confusion, then shock, then something approaching panic. What do you mean withdrawn? His voice rose. No, there must be a mistake. Check again. Silence as he listened. All of it? That's impossible. Who authorized this? More silence. His face was going red. What do you mean effective immediately? We have contracts, agreements. Marcus and Thomas exchanged worried glances. Victoria set down her wine glass. I need to call you back, Dad said, his voice tight. He hung up and immediately started dialing another number. Richard. Mom's voice was sharp. What's going on? He held up a hand, phone to his ear. Bill, it's Richard Anderson. I just got a call that seems, yes, I'll hold. He put his hand over the phone. There's some kind of issue with our primary funding source. I'm sure it's just a miscommunication. But his face said he wasn't sure at all. Another phone call. Then another. With each one, Dad's expression grew darker. Marcus's phone started ringing too, then Thomas's. The elegant dinner party was dissolving into chaos. I don't understand, Dad was saying to someone. We had a 5-year commitment. Yes, I understand there are clauses, but a major capital restructuring? By who? I ate my steak. It had gone slightly cold, but it was still good. Emma, Mom said suddenly. This is serious. Your father is dealing with a crisis. I can see that, I replied. Dad hung up and stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. Our primary investor just withdrew $180 million from our operations. The table gasped. Victoria actually grabbed Marcus's arm. $180 million? Thomas's voice cracked. That's everything. That's the expansion, the current properties, the operational capital. I'm aware, Dad snapped. Then his phone rang again. It's the board. I need to take this. He stood up and walked to his study, his confident stride replaced with something uncertain. Marcus followed him. Then Thomas. Mom sat frozen, her perfect composure cracking. This can't be happening. Who would do this? Jennifer asked. Who could do this? I took another bite of steak. Aren't you concerned? Victoria demanded. This is our family business. Is it? I asked mildly. I was told quite clearly tonight that it's not my business. That I don't understand. That I'm playing in the kiddie pool. This isn't the time for petty, Victoria started, but Mom cut her off. Emma. Mom's voice was different now. Do you know something about this? I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. What would I know? I just make apps, remember? I operate out of a coffee shop. Voices rose from the study. We could hear Dad shouting, though we couldn't make out the words. My phone buzzed. David, Anderson Holdings is in full crisis mode. They're trying to find alternative funding, but everyone's calling me asking what I know. The word is spreading fast. Stock price is going to tank when this goes public tomorrow. I typed back, let me know if they figure it out. David, they won't. I buried the ownership structure under 17 layers of shell companies and investment firms. The only name attached is Pacific Northwest Ventures LLC. Even their forensic accountants will take weeks to trace it. Dad emerged from his study followed by Marcus and Thomas. All three looked like they'd aged a decade. We need to find out who Pacific Northwest Ventures is, Dad said without preamble. They're the ones who withdrew the funding. Does anyone recognize that name? Heads shook around the table. Marcus, get our lawyers on this. Thomas, call every investor contact we have. Someone must know who's behind this. Dad ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd never seen from him. He was always so controlled. Jennifer, you worked in venture capital before. Do you know this firm? Pacific Northwest Ventures? Jennifer pulled out her phone, typing quickly. I can't find anything. No website, no public filings, no portfolio companies listed anywhere. It's a ghost. Ghosts don't have $180 million, Victoria snapped. I cleared my throat. Actually, Pacific Northwest Ventures has considerably more than that. Everyone turned to look at me. What did you say? Dad's voice was very quiet. Pacific Northwest Ventures. It's one of the largest private investment firms in the region. They focus on real estate, technology, and strategic acquisitions. Total assets under management are approximately $800 million. I paused. Give or take. How do you know this? Marcus demanded. I read, I said simply. It's a fairly well-known firm in investment circles. I've never heard of it, Dad said. That's because they're private and very selective about their public profile. I took a sip of water. They prefer to work through intermediaries and subsidiary companies. Very sophisticated operation. The way I said sophisticated made Victoria's eyes narrow. If you know so much about them, Thomas said slowly, do you know why they'd pull funding from us? I couldn't possibly speculate, I replied. I'm sure they have their reasons. Major capital restructuring decisions like that don't happen randomly. Dad's phone rang again. He looked at it and his face went white. It's Lawrence Hendricks. The Lawrence Hendricks? Mom's voice was faint. From Hendricks Capital? Dad answered, putting it on speaker. Lawrence, thank you for calling back so quickly. Richard. The voice that came through the speaker was measured and professional. I heard about your situation. I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know that Hendricks Capital won't be able to provide bridge financing at this time. But Lawrence, we've worked together for 15 years. And I value that relationship. Which is why I'm being direct with you. Whatever happened with Pacific Northwest Ventures has created significant risk concerns. Until you resolve your relationship with them, no serious investment firm is going to touch Anderson Holdings. Our relationship? We don't have a relationship with them beyond standard investment terms. This is clearly some kind of hostile action. Is it? Lawrence's voice was sharp. Richard, Pacific Northwest Ventures doesn't do hostile anything. They're one of the most respected private investment operations in 3 states. If they pulled funding, there was a reason. And until I know what that reason is, I have to protect my investors. Silence around the table. You could hear the chandelier crystals tinkling in the ventilation draft. You're saying Pacific Northwest Ventures has that much influence? Dad's voice was strained. Richard, they could buy out Hendricks Capital tomorrow if they wanted to. They have connections at every major bank, every venture capital firm, every private equity group on the West Coast. Crossing them is career suicide. Pause. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Then you better figure out what happened, because as of right now your company is untouchable. The line went dead. Dad stood there holding his phone like it was a live grenade. This is insane, Victoria said. One firm can't have that much power. Marcus's phone buzzed. Then Thomas's. They both looked at their screens and went pale. What? Mom demanded. It's spreading, Marcus said weakly. I just got 3 emails from investor contacts. They're all asking what happened with Pacific Northwest Ventures. They're all saying they need to reassess their position with us. Same here, Thomas added. One of them said, and I quote, I didn't know you had PNV backing. Why would you jeopardize that relationship? I checked my own phone. David had sent me a message with a simple emoji. Smiling face with sunglasses. Dad slowly sat down. Someone find out everything about Pacific Northwest Ventures. Everything. Who runs it, what they invest in, who their other portfolio companies are. There has to be a way to fix this. I can help with that, I said. Everyone looked at me again. You can. Dad's voice had something in it I'd never heard before. Hope maybe. Or desperation. I know quite a bit about Pacific Northwest Ventures, I confirmed. I've followed their operations for years. Studied their investment patterns, their decision-making processes, their portfolio management strategies. Why would you study them? Victoria asked suspiciously. Because they're brilliant, I said simply. They started 5 years ago with seed capital of about $50 million. Through strategic investments and careful portfolio management, they've grown to over $800 million in assets. They focus on undervalued properties, emerging technology companies, and strategic real estate acquisitions. Their return rate is 43% annually. I had everyone's complete attention now. They've invested in 27 different companies and properties across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, I continued. Real estate development, tech startups, manufacturing facilities, commercial properties. Their portfolio includes the Riverside Complex downtown, the Morrison Building, and approximately 30% of the startup companies in the Seattle metro area. How do you know all this? Mom asked. Research, I said. It's what I do. Financial analysis, market research, investment pattern recognition. It's kind of my thing. Dad leaned forward. Do you know how to contact them? I might be able to facilitate an introduction, I said carefully. But I should warn you, they're very selective about who they work with. They have certain standards. Standards. Marcus bristled. Anderson Holdings is a $40 million company with a 30-year track record. Was a $40 million company, I corrected gently. Without that $180 million in backing, your actual operational value is closer to $15 million. And most of that is leveraged. The silence was deafening. How do you know our operational numbers? Dad's voice was dangerous now. Public filings, property records, market analysis, I replied. It's not secret information. Anyone who knows where to look can find it. Thomas was typing frantically on his laptop. She's right. Without the PNV backing, we're in serious trouble. The expansion deal requires proof of capital by next week. If we can't show it, we lose the down payment. That's $8 million. We'll find other investors, Dad said, but he didn't sound confident. In a week. Victoria's voice was climbing. After word gets out that Pacific Northwest Ventures dropped us? Lawrence was right, we're toxic now. My phone rang. I glanced at it. Excuse me, I need to take this. It's my investment manager. I stood and walked to the window, turning my back to the table but speaking loud enough for them to hear. Hi, David. Yes, I saw the news. No, I don't think they've figured it out yet. What? Another withdrawal? Which property? Oh, the Morrison Building. Yes, that makes sense. That's entirely controlled by PNV, isn't it? They're trying to trace the ownership? Tell legal to make it as complicated as possible. Of course. Yes, I'll be back in Seattle tomorrow. We can meet then. I hung up and turned back to the table. Everyone was staring at me. Sorry about that, I said, returning to my seat. Where were we? Who was that? Dad asked. My investment manager. David Chen. He handles my portfolio. Your portfolio, Marcus repeated slowly. Yes. I do have investments, you know. Just because I run a tech company doesn't mean I don't diversify. I smiled. It's investment 101. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Dad's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face changed again. It's a text from Bill at the bank. He says someone from Pacific Northwest Ventures legal team just contacted him asking about our account status and creditworthiness. That's unusual, I commented. Investment firms don't usually make direct contact with banks after a withdrawal. Unless what? Mom demanded. Unless they're considering additional action. Maybe they're not just withdrawing funding. Maybe they're positioning for something else. Like what? Thomas asked. I shrugged. Takeover? A buyout? Hard to say without knowing their strategy. Victoria's eyes were sharp on me now. Too sharp. You know a lot about how they operate. I told you I've studied them. Nobody studies an investment firm that carefully unless they have a reason, Victoria pressed. What's your reason, Emma? I met her gaze calmly. Professional curiosity. They're good at what they do. I like learning from the best. Dad's phone rang again. He answered without checking the caller. Yes. What? You can't be serious. No, I understand, but... Fine. Thank you for letting me know. He hung up and looked at Mom. The Morrison Building. What about it? They're exercising their majority control. Effective immediately, Anderson Holdings is no longer managing the property. Pacific Northwest Ventures is taking direct control. They can't do that, Marcus said. They can, I said. If they hold majority ownership. Which they do. 51%, I believe. Every head swiveled toward me. How could you possibly know that? Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. It's in the property records. Public information. I paused. Actually, Pacific Northwest Ventures holds majority or significant minority positions in most of your major properties. The Morrison Building, the Riverside Complex, the downtown parking structures, the Harborview Apartments. They're quite strategically positioned in your portfolio. That's impossible, Mom said. We'd know if one firm had that much control. Would you? I asked. Do you personally review every investment document? Every shareholder agreement? Every ownership structure? Thomas was typing again, his face growing increasingly alarmed. Emma's right. I'm looking at the ownership records now. PNV shows up in almost every major property we manage. How did we not notice this? Because they came in through different subsidiary companies at different times, I explained. That's their strategy. They don't announce themselves. They quietly accumulate strategic positions. Then when they have sufficient control, they act. This is insane, Victoria said. It's like they planned this. They probably did, I agreed. Pacific Northwest Ventures doesn't do anything accidentally. Every investment is strategic. Every acquisition is calculated. They're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Dad was staring at me now with an expression I couldn't quite read. Emma, how do you really know all this? I told you. No. His voice was firm. Nobody knows this level of detail about a private investment firm without direct access. The ownership percentages, the portfolio strategy, the legal maneuvering. You're not guessing. You know. The table was silent. Outside I could hear a car drive by. Inside, the chandelier crystals tinkled. I took a breath. You want to know about Pacific Northwest Ventures? Yes. All right. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I forwarded a message to Dad's email address. Check your phone. He did. His face went from confusion to shock to something I'd never seen before. Understanding maybe. Or horror. What is it? Mom grabbed his phone. She looked at the screen. Her hand went to her mouth. Marcus leaned over to look. His eyes went wide. No. No way. The email was simple. It was from David Chen, my investment manager. The subject line read, Pacific Northwest Ventures LLC Ownership Structure and Portfolio Summary. The body of the email listed everything. Every property, every investment, every strategic acquisition. The Morrison Building. The Riverside Complex. The Harborview Apartments. 15 other properties and 7 tech companies. At the bottom in bold, primary shareholder and CO, Emma Anderson. Total assets under management, $847 million. You, Dad whispered. You're Pacific Northwest Ventures. I am Pacific Northwest Ventures, I confirmed. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the table. Nobody moved to clean it up. That's impossible, Marcus said. You make apps. I do make apps, I agreed. My company, Anderson Tech Solutions, generates about $30 million in annual revenue. But that's not where most of my money comes from. Then where? Thomas's voice was faint. Investments. I took my initial success from my first app and invested it. Smart investments. Strategic investments. I started with real estate because I learned from the best. I nodded at Dad. You taught me everything you know even if you didn't mean to. I watched. I learned. I did what you did, but I did it better. $800 million, Mom said numbly. You have $800 million. $847 million, but who's counting? I took another sip of water. And yes, $180 million of that was invested in Anderson Holdings. I've been your primary backer for 5 years. Dad's face was ashen. Why? Because I believed in the company. Because despite everything it's good at what it does. And because I thought maybe, eventually, you'd see me as something other than the family disappointment who makes apps. But you withdrew, Thomas said. You pulled all the funding. I did. Why? Dad asked again. I looked around the table at my family. My successful, confident, dismissive family. Because you told me my $300,000 was pocket change, I said simply. Because you laughed at my offer to help. Because after 5 years of secretly funding your entire operation, of making sure you had the capital to expand and thrive, you told me I was playing in the kiddie pool while you were in the ocean. The silence stretched. So I decided to show you what the ocean actually looks like, I continued. Without my backing, Anderson Holdings is a $15 million company with $8 million in debt and no way to complete your expansion. The Morrison Building? I own 51%. Always have. The Riverside Complex? 63%. Harborview? 47%. Every major property you manage I have controlling or significant interest. Why did you hide it? Mom asked. Because I wanted to see if you'd ever treat me like I belonged. If you'd ever see me as capable, as intelligent, as worthy of respect. I smiled sadly. You didn't. Even tonight when I offered to help you mocked me. So now you know. Marcus found his voice. What happens now? That depends, I said. On you. On us. Victoria's voice was sharp, but there was fear in it now. On whether you want me to stay invested or not. I looked at Dad. You said Anderson Holdings is a family business. You were right. And I'm family whether you like it or not. So here's my offer. I'll restore the funding. All $180 million. I'll even increase my investment to $200 million to help with the expansion. Hope flickered across Dad's face. But, I continued, things change. I'm not a silent partner anymore. I want a seat on the board. I want full transparency on all investments and decisions. And I want respect. Real respect, not patronizing comments about my little tech thing. And if we refuse? Victoria asked. Then I pull all my investments from every property and company I'm involved with that has any connection to Anderson Holdings. I have controlling interest in most of your portfolio. I could dismantle your entire operation in a week. I kept my voice calm. Or you could accept that your daughter isn't playing in the kiddie pool. She built the ocean you're drowning in. Dad stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly he stood up and walked around the table. He stopped in front of me. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time in my life he sounded like he meant it. For what, specifically? I asked. For underestimating you. For dismissing you. For not seeing. He trailed off. For not seeing any of it. Mom stood too. Emma, we had no idea. You had no idea because you never asked, I said. You assumed. You decided who I was without ever really looking. Thomas cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think a seat on the board is more than fair. I vote yes. Same, Marcus said quietly. He looked shaken. I'm sorry, Emma. For all of it. Victoria was the last to speak. You really control $800 million? Give or take. She laughed, but it wasn't mocking this time. It was almost admiring. You're terrifying. Thank you, I said. Dad extended his hand. Partners. I looked at his hand for a moment, then took it. Partners. But I want that in writing. Official board position, voting rights, full disclosure. Done. My phone buzzed. David, should I restore the funding? I typed back, yes. All of it. Plus an additional $20 million. Time to show them what serious money looks like. I looked around the table at my family's faces. Shock, respect, fear, admiration, all mixed together. One more thing, I said. That $300,000 I offered? I'm still putting that in. Consider it a personal investment separate from Pacific Northwest Ventures. Because family supports family, even when family doesn't deserve it. Emma, Mom said, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. And I accept your apology. But this can't happen again. I'm not the family member you tolerate at dinner parties. I'm the person who's been keeping this company afloat for 5 years. Remember that. Dad nodded slowly. We will. I promise. My phone rang. I glanced at it. It's my manager. I need to take this. I answered. David? Yes, authorize the funding restoration. All properties full capital reinstatement. No, increase it to $200 million total. Yes, I'm sure. Also, prepare the paperwork for my board position at Anderson Holdings. Everything official. Perfect. See you Monday. I hung up and looked at my family. You'll have your funding back by tomorrow morning. The board will receive my appointment paperwork on Monday. The expansion can proceed as planned. Thank you, Dad said. Don't thank me, I replied. This is business. I'm an investor protecting my investment. The fact that you're my family is secondary. I stood up. Now if you'll excuse me, I have an early flight back to Seattle. I have actual business to attend to. Emma, wait, Mom called as I headed for the door. Can we talk more about this? About everything? I paused at the doorway. Sure. Call my office and schedule an appointment. My assistant will find time in my calendar. The shock on their faces was almost worth the 5 years of secret investment. Almost. As I drove away from the Anderson family mansion, my phone buzzed with messages from David. The funding was being restored. The lawyers were drawing up my board position papers. Stock prices would stabilize by morning. I'd spent 5 years building an empire in secret, funding my family's business while they dismissed me as someone who made apps. Tonight I'd shown them the truth. Not with anger, not with gloating, but with the simple, devastating power of facts and numbers. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's proving them wrong with $800 million and a smile. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Dad. I really am proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I'm sorry it took this for me to see what you'd become. I smiled and texted back. See you at the board meeting, Dad. The kiddie pool, it turned out, was just where I'd been practicing before I built the ocean. And now they were all swimming in it whether they liked it or not. I'd offered them $300,000 and they'd laughed. Now they owed me $200 million and they'd never see me the same way again. Perfect. The cranberry sauce was still warm when my sister Michelle dropped her bombshell announcement at our family's Thanksgiving dinner. She stood up from her chair at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, like she was making a toast to her own brilliance. The dining room fell silent except for the soft clinking of silverware against china plates as 23 relatives turned their attention to her. I have some exciting news to share with everyone, she announced, her voice carrying that familiar tone of superiority she'd perfected over the years. I've been helping Sarah make some much-needed financial decisions that should have been made years ago. She gestured toward me with her glass, and I felt the familiar weight of nearly 24 pairs of eyes settling on me from around our extended family gathering. I continued cutting my turkey methodically, keeping my expression neutral and my movements calm. At 32, I'd learned that reacting to Michelle's declarations only fed her need for drama and attention. She was 35, married to a successful orthodontist named Brad, and had appointed herself the family's financial advisor despite having never worked outside of managing her husband's dental practice and organizing charity luncheons for their country club. Sarah's been living in that tiny one-bedroom condo downtown for 6 years now, Michelle continued, her voice growing more animated as she warmed to her topic. Same cramped space, same outdated kitchen with those horrible laminate countertops, never upgrading or improving her situation. She's been throwing money away on mortgage payments and property taxes when she should be building a real future. The murmurs of agreement started immediately. My cousin Jennifer nodded vigorously from across the table. I've been saying the same thing. That place is so small you can barely fit a dining table. Michelle beamed at the support. Exactly. So I took initiative and listed it for sale through one of Brad's patients who's a real estate agent. We got a buyer at $315,000, which is honestly more than that little place is worth in today's volatile market. The timing couldn't be better. The table erupted in enthusiastic approval. Aunt Linda clapped her hands together with genuine excitement. Oh, Michelle, that's absolutely wonderful. Someone needs to help Sarah make practical decisions about her future. Uncle Bob, who owned 3 rental properties in the suburbs, nodded sagely from his position next to my father. Real estate's about to crash anyway with interest rates climbing. Better to get out now while you can still make a profit. My mother practically glowed with pride as she looked between Michelle and me. This is exactly the kind of family support we need during uncertain times. Michelle's always been so good with money and long-term planning. Remember how she helped Aunt Carol refinance her house and saved her thousands? She turned to me with that patient, slightly condescending expression she'd worn since I was a teenager making questionable choices about college majors and career paths. Honey, you should be grateful Michelle took charge of this situation. You've always been too sentimental about that little place, and sentiment doesn't build wealth or security. I sipped my coffee slowly and smiled peacefully. That sounds like quite an accomplishment, Michelle. I'm sure you put a lot of thought and effort into this decision. The family interpreted my calm response as acceptance, maybe even gratitude masked by embarrassment at having my financial limitations discussed so publicly. They couldn't know that my tiny condo was registered with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network as a monitored property under federal security protocols. They had no way of understanding that any unauthorized transactions involving the property would automatically trigger federal investigation procedures that couldn't be stopped or reversed once initiated. Michelle had no possible way of knowing that I worked for FinCEN as a senior financial analyst specializing in complex money laundering investigations and international financial crime networks. My top-secret security clearance required comprehensive disclosure of all assets, investments and financial relationships. My condo's deed was flagged in multiple federal databases as belonging to someone with access to highly sensitive financial intelligence that could compromise national security if exploited. The modest one-bedroom unit I'd purchased with cash 6 years ago wasn't just my home. It was a protected federal asset under continuous monitoring systems designed to detect any unauthorized access, modification or transfer attempts. The location had been specifically chosen after extensive background investigations and security reviews conducted by federal agencies. My family saw a struggling government worker living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped downtown apartment that barely met their standards for adult living. They saw someone who drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door, shopped at discount grocery stores with coupons, and never took expensive vacations to exotic destinations like the rest of the family. They assumed my government job was some low-level administrative position that barely covered my monthly bills and offered no real advancement opportunities. When relatives asked what I did for work, I always said, financial analysis for the Treasury Department, which they interpreted as boring paperwork and number crunching that anyone with basic math skills could handle. What they couldn't see was that my security clearance restricted nearly every aspect of my financial life. Where I could live, what I could purchase, how I could invest money, who I could associate with, what countries I could visit, and how I could conduct any financial transactions. Every asset I owned had to be disclosed, documented, and continuously monitored by federal security systems. The condo that looked tiny and outdated to them was strategically located within secure distance of federal facilities, purchased after months of background checks, financial audits, and security reviews by multiple agencies. The modest furnishings and lack of expensive electronics weren't signs of financial struggle. They were requirements for maintaining security clearance in sensitive positions. The closing is scheduled for next Friday at 2 p.m., Michelle continued, clearly savoring her moment as the family's problem solver and financial expert. I've already signed all the paperwork as Sarah's power of attorney, so there won't be any delays or complications. The buyers are a lovely young couple from Brad's practice. He did their dental work last year, and they're paying cash, so we don't have to worry about financing approvals or loan complications. My cousin Jennifer leaned forward with obvious interest and admiration. You have power of attorney over Sarah's finances? That's really smart planning for family emergencies and situations like this. Michelle waved her hand dismissively, as if the legal complexities were minor details hardly worth discussing. Oh, I just forged Sarah's signature on the necessary documents. She would have overthought everything and probably backed out at the last minute like she always does. Sometimes family has to make hard decisions for family members who can't see the bigger picture. The casual admission of forgery hung in the air like it was perfectly normal family business rather than a serious criminal act. Several relatives chuckled and nodded approvingly at Michelle's practical approach to family problem solving. My father actually laughed out loud and shook his head with fond exasperation. That's our Michelle, always cutting through red tape and bureaucracy to get things done efficiently. Uncle Bob raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. Sometimes you have to save people from their own poor judgment and indecision. Sarah's lucky to have someone looking out for her best interests. I took another sip of coffee and maintained my peaceful, grateful expression. Michelle had just admitted to identity theft, wire fraud, and federal property crimes in front of 23 witnesses, most of whom had encouraged or applauded her criminal behavior. She'd also committed multiple federal felonies by attempting to transfer monitored property without authorization from federal security agencies. But I said nothing about the legal implications or potential consequences. In approximately 18 hours, she would discover the severity of those choices through direct experience with federal law enforcement agencies. The rest of dinner passed with Michelle receiving continuous congratulations for her initiative and family-minded thinking. She explained in detail how she'd found the buyers through Brad's dental practice connections, how she'd skillfully negotiated the price up from their initial $290,000 offer by emphasizing the prime downtown location and investment potential, and how she planned to help me find a more suitable and appropriate rental apartment in their suburban neighborhood. Sarah can finally stop throwing money away on mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs, she declared while serving pumpkin pie with obvious satisfaction. Renting makes so much more sense for someone in her situation and at her income level. No repair worries, no property value stress, no market fluctuation anxiety. Just simple, predictable monthly payments that free up money for other priorities. My grandmother, who was 87 and had always worried about my unconventional life choices, patted my hand with genuine affection. This is such a blessing, dear. Michelle's really looking out for your best interests and long-term security. You should listen to her advice more often. The entire table murmured agreement and approval. I was surrounded by family members who truly believed they were witnessing an act of loving intervention and practical problem-solving rather than the commission of multiple federal crimes that would result in years of federal prison sentences and permanent criminal records. After dinner, Michelle pulled me aside in the kitchen while everyone else gathered in the living room to watch football and argue about politics. The kitchen was warm from cooking, and she looked flushed with wine and self-satisfaction as she loaded the dishwasher with the efficiency of someone used to managing household staff. I know this feels sudden and maybe a little overwhelming, she said with mock sympathy, adopting the patient tone she used when explaining complex financial concepts to less sophisticated people. Change is always hard to accept, especially when you've gotten comfortable with suboptimal situations. But sometimes the people who love you have to make difficult decisions that you can't see clearly yourself. I continued drying the dishes she handed me and nodded thoughtfully. I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should, Michelle. You've obviously put a lot of thought into this. She smiled with deep satisfaction and obvious relief that I wasn't going to cause family drama by objecting to her perfectly reasonable intervention. Exactly. That's the mature attitude I hoped you'd take. Sometimes the younger sister needs the older sister to make the tough choices that seem scary in the moment but turn out to be exactly right in the long run. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel and looked at me with the expression of someone delivering important final instructions. The closing is at 2 p.m. Friday at Stevens and Associates Law Office downtown on 5th Street. It's the same firm Brad uses for all his business contracts, so they're very professional and efficient. I'll handle everything personally. You don't even need to be there or take time off work. I'll bring all the documents to your place Friday evening so you can see everything was handled properly. Friday morning arrived gray and cold with the promise of December snow. I was at my desk at the Treasury building by 7:15 a.m., earlier than usual because I wanted to clear my caseload before the inevitable interruptions that would come later in the day. My office was on the 4th floor with a view of the Potomac River, and I spent the first 3 hours reviewing suspicious activity reports from banks across the Mid-Atlantic region. My current assignment involved tracking money laundering patterns in cryptocurrency transactions that showed signs of connection to international terrorist financing networks. The work required analyzing complex financial data, coordinating with federal law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions, and preparing detailed reports that would be used in federal prosecutions and national security investigations. At 11:47 a.m., my personal cell phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Sarah, this is Attorney David Stevens from Stevens and Associates. There's been an emergency situation with your property sale. Please call my office immediately. This is extremely urgent. I didn't call immediately. The word emergency in legal communications usually meant someone had discovered they were about to face serious criminal charges, and I had learned that immediate panic responses rarely improved anyone's situation. Instead, I finished analyzing a particularly complex wire transfer pattern that suggested shell company fraud involving 14 different financial institutions across 6 states, submitted my detailed report through secure federal channels, and then called the number at 12:23 p.m. Ms. Johnson, thank God you called back, Attorney Stevens said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. There are federal agents at my office right now. FBI agents with warrants. They've seized all files related to your property sale, including the original contracts, financial records, and correspondence. They're saying the transaction involves federal property fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized transfer of monitored assets. I leaned back in my desk chair and looked out at the gray December sky over the Potomac. That sounds very serious, Mr. Stevens. What exactly are they telling you? They've issued warrants for document seizure and are treating this as a major federal investigation. They want to speak with your sister immediately, and they've asked for her current location and contact information. His voice cracked slightly with stress. Ms. Johnson, I need to ask you directly. Did you authorize your sister to sign any documents on your behalf regarding the sale of your property? No, I did not authorize Michelle to sign any documents for me, Mr. Stevens. There was a long pause filled only with the sound of his rapid breathing. Oh my God. She forged your signature on federal property transfer documents. This isn't just civil fraud or family disputes. This is multiple federal crimes with mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. The agents are talking about wire fraud, identity theft, and violations of federal property monitoring statutes. I could hear voices in the background of his office, official and authoritative tones that I recognized from my own work coordinating with federal law enforcement agencies. Mr. Stevens, I would recommend that you cooperate fully with the federal investigation and provide whatever documentation and information the agents require. They're asking me to contact your sister immediately to inform her that federal agents want to interview her. They're also asking about the buyers and whether they were aware that this involved federal property. This is a disaster, Ms. Johnson. I could lose my license over this. At 1:23 p.m., my personal phone rang. Michelle's name appeared on the screen. Sarah, what the hell is going on? Her voice was shrill with panic and confusion. FBI agents just showed up at my house with official badges and warrants. They're saying I committed federal crimes. They want to arrest me and seize my computer and financial records. I was still at my desk, calmly reviewing case files and preparing for an afternoon meeting about cryptocurrency tracking protocols. Through my window, I could see federal employees walking between buildings, conducting the routine business of national financial security. That sounds very stressful and upsetting, Michelle. Stressful? They're talking about federal prison sentences. They said something about monitored property and security violations and unauthorized transfer of federal assets. What does any of that mean? You work some boring government job doing paperwork. What security violations could possibly be involved? Two federal agents in dark suits had indeed arrived at my sister's house at 1:15 p.m. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force and Special Agent James Park from the Treasury Department's Criminal Investigation Division had spent the morning coordinating with federal security protocols and reviewing the automatically generated investigation reports. When property registered under federal monitoring systems shows unauthorized transfer activity, automated security protocols engage within hours according to established national security procedures. The FinCEN database had flagged my condo's attempted sale at 9:42 a.m. when the title company submitted preliminary paperwork to the county recorder's office. By 10:15 a.m., federal investigators were reviewing transaction details, confirming identity theft and preparing warrants for document seizure and suspect interviews. "Michelle," I said calmly, maintaining the same peaceful tone I'd used throughout our Thanksgiving dinner conversation, "you admitted at dinner yesterday that you forged my signature on legal documents to sell federal property. You committed wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and attempted unauthorized transfer of monitored federal assets. Federal property? It's just your stupid little condo that nobody cares about. My condo is registered with the Treasury Department as a monitored asset under federal security protocols. Any unauthorized transactions trigger automatic federal investigation procedures that cannot be stopped once initiated. Your forged signature on transfer documents constitutes multiple federal crimes with mandatory minimum sentences ranging from 4 to 12 years in federal prison." The line went quiet except for her increasingly ragged breathing and what sounded like muffled crying. "Michelle, you need to surrender yourself to federal authorities immediately and retain qualified federal criminal defense counsel," I continued in the same calm, professional tone I used when briefing law enforcement agencies about financial crime investigations. "Resisting arrest, fleeing, or attempting to obstruct the investigation will result in additional federal charges that carry even longer sentences. The buyer's earnest money has been seized as evidence. The title company is under federal investigation for their role in processing fraudulent documents, and Attorney Stevens is cooperating fully with federal investigators to avoid criminal charges himself." But I was trying to help you. The whole family agreed this was the right financial decision for your future. The family's agreement doesn't override federal law, Michelle. You committed serious federal crimes in front of 23 witnesses who heard you admit to forgery and identity theft. Those witnesses will be subpoenaed to testify in federal court about what they heard you say. I could hear Agent Rodriguez's voice in the background, calm and professional, explaining Miranda rights and federal arrest procedures. Michelle was being given the opportunity to surrender voluntarily rather than be forcibly arrested, which would look better during sentencing hearings. "Sarah, please. You have to stop this. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "I cannot stop a federal investigation, Michelle. Federal crimes have federal consequences regardless of family relationships or personal feelings. You committed the crimes, you admitted to the crimes in front of multiple witnesses, and federal law enforcement agencies are required to prosecute those crimes." At 2:47 p.m., Michelle surrendered herself to federal authorities at the FBI field office downtown. She was processed, photographed, fingerprinted, and held in federal detention pending arraignment. The charges were extensive and serious: wire fraud across state lines, aggravated identity theft, attempted federal property fraud, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and violations of federal security monitoring statutes. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed formal criminal charges within 72 hours. Michelle faced a minimum sentence of 6 to 10 years in federal prison, plus restitution costs exceeding $85,000 for federal investigation expenses, legal fees, damages to all parties involved in the fraudulent transaction, and administrative costs for security protocol violations. The buyers, a young couple named David and Jennifer Walsh, lost their $31,500 earnest money deposit and faced their own legal complications for attempting to purchase federal property through fraudulent means. However, federal investigators determined they were unknowing victims of Michelle's scheme rather than willing participants in federal crimes. They still faced financial losses and legal fees exceeding $15,000. Attorney David Stevens faced immediate disciplinary action from the State Bar Association for failing to verify signatures on federal property documents and for not conducting proper due diligence regarding property ownership and authorization. His law license was suspended pending investigation, and his professional liability insurance company initiated legal action to recover their anticipated losses from the federal investigation. My family's reaction was predictable but still disappointing. They called me heartless and vindictive for pressing charges against my own sister over what they characterized as a simple family misunderstanding that had gotten blown out of proportion by government bureaucrats. They couldn't comprehend that I hadn't pressed any charges at all. Federal monitoring systems had automatically detected the crimes and initiated prosecution procedures according to established national security protocols. My mother called me repeatedly, crying and begging me to fix this situation by talking to my boss, or someone in charge, who could make the federal charges disappear. She couldn't understand that federal crimes don't disappear because family members ask nicely, and that my job involved investigating financial crimes rather than dismissing them. At Michelle's arraignment 2 weeks later, she appeared in federal court wearing an orange detention jumpsuit, looking pale and exhausted from her time in federal holding. She pleaded not guilty and attempted to claim she thought she was helping me make a wise financial decision that I was too emotionally attached to make myself. Federal prosecutors presented comprehensive evidence including her recorded admission of forgery at the Thanksgiving dinner, financial records showing the detailed fraudulent transaction attempts, testimony from 23 witnesses who heard her confess to multiple crimes, and expert testimony from Treasury Department security officials explaining the federal monitoring systems and why unauthorized transfers triggered automatic criminal investigation. The federal judge denied bail, citing flight risk, the seriousness of federal property fraud charges, and the potential national security implications of unauthorized access to monitored federal assets. Michelle would remain in federal detention until trial, which was scheduled for 4 months later. During the pretrial period, federal investigators discovered that Michelle had previously forged signatures on other family members' documents, including mortgage refinancing papers for our elderly aunt and unauthorized credit applications using our cousin's social security number. What had seemed like an isolated incident of poor judgment was revealed to be a pattern of financial fraud spanning several years. The additional evidence strengthened the federal case and eliminated any possibility of plea bargaining for reduced charges. Michelle's defense attorney, a court-appointed federal public defender, advised her that federal conviction was virtually certain given the overwhelming evidence and witness testimony. 3 months later, facing mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines and overwhelming evidence that included her own recorded confession, Michelle accepted a plea agreement to avoid an even longer sentence after trial. She received 6 years in federal prison, 4 years supervised probation, and court-ordered restitution of $127,000 to cover all federal investigation costs, legal fees, damages to multiple parties, and administrative expenses for security protocol violations. The federal judge explained during sentencing that crimes involving federal security protocols carried enhanced penalties because they potentially compromised national security systems designed to protect sensitive government operations and personnel. Michelle's actions had triggered expensive security reviews, protocol modifications, and enhanced monitoring procedures that cost taxpayers significant resources. My condo remained exactly where it had always been, registered under Treasury Department monitoring systems as the protected federal asset of a government employee with top-secret security clearance. The property couldn't be sold, transferred, or modified without extensive federal oversight, security reviews, and authorization from multiple agencies. The attempted fraud had actually resulted in enhanced security protocols around my property and increased monitoring of my financial activities. Federal security officials conducted comprehensive reviews of all my assets, relationships, and potential vulnerabilities that might be exploited by hostile actors seeking access to sensitive financial intelligence. I still live in my tiny one-bedroom condo downtown, still drive my 7-year-old Honda Civic, still shop at discount stores, and still take modest vacations within the United States. My family still doesn't understand that my lifestyle choices are partially dictated by security requirements rather than financial limitations, and I'm not authorized to explain the details of those requirements. The difference now is that family gatherings are much quieter and more subdued. Michelle won't be eligible for release until she's served her full federal sentence, which doesn't allow for early release or parole. The relatives who encouraged her criminal behavior now face their own financial consequences. 12 family members received federal subpoenas as material witnesses in criminal proceedings, costing them thousands in legal fees and lost work time. Several family members have faced enhanced scrutiny for their own financial activities after being associated with the federal financial crimes case. Uncle Bob's rental property business was audited by the IRS, and 2 cousins had their security clearances at their own government jobs reviewed after being connected to federal fraud investigations. My mother calls occasionally to ask when I'll forgive Michelle and help with her legal expenses and commissary money for federal prison. I explain calmly that federal crimes carry federal consequences regardless of family relationships, and that the U.S. justice system doesn't recognize family forgiveness as grounds for dismissing charges or reducing sentences. She doesn't understand that my security clearance actually prohibits me from providing financial assistance to family members convicted of federal crimes, particularly those involving financial fraud and security violations. Any such assistance would jeopardize my own career and potentially result in criminal charges against me. Last month I received a letter from Michelle at the Federal Correctional Institution where she's serving her sentence. She wrote that she finally understands she committed serious crimes with serious consequences, but she still doesn't understand why I never warned the family about the potential legal problems with their suggestions. She asked why I didn't stop her before she destroyed her own life and caused so much damage to other people. I wrote back with a simple, honest response. Federal law doesn't require warnings before prosecuting crimes. You made your choices based on your own assumptions and desires. My job was never to prevent you from making those choices or to protect you from their consequences. The letter came back 3 weeks later marked return to sender, inmate transferred. Apparently, Michelle had been moved to a different federal facility, possibly due to disciplinary issues or security reclassification. I still sip my coffee quietly at the few family gatherings I attend. I still smile and stay calm when relatives make assumptions about my life, finances, and career prospects. The difference is that now they're much more careful and hesitant about offering suggestions regarding my property, financial decisions, or life choices. Some lessons about federal law and personal responsibility can only be learned through direct experience. Federal prison provides excellent education in the long-term consequences of financial crimes, identity theft, and unauthorized interference with federal security systems. My condo remains exactly where it belongs, under federal protection and monitoring systems, just like it's always been since the day I purchased it with full disclosure to Treasury Department security officials 6 years ago. The notification popped up on my phone at 11:47 p.m. while I was reviewing quarterly reports for Azure Coast Hospitality. Instagram at Chloe Winters 23 posted a new photo. My sister's face filled the screen, beaming beside our parents and her husband Derek at what looked like an expensive resort. The caption made my chest tighten. Family vacation without the burden. Finally some peace and relaxation with the people who matter. #blessed, #family time, #NadraMamama. 847 likes already. Mom had commented, perfect family time. Dad added, best vacation ever. Derek's comment, no toxic energy equals best energy. I scrolled through the photos. Mom and Dad by an infinity pool. Chloe and Derek at a beachside restaurant. The whole family raising champagne glasses on a sunset terrace. Everyone laughing, everyone happy. Everyone except me. The burden, apparently. I stared at my phone for a long moment, sitting in my modest downtown apartment. Around me were the trappings of what my family believed was my unsuccessful life. Second-hand furniture, a small TV, takeout containers from the Vietnamese place down the street. What they didn't see were the multiple monitors in my home office displaying real-time data from my hospitality empire. Occupancy rates, revenue streams, property acquisitions. The screens showed a business worth $1.8 billion spanning 4 countries. I typed a comment on Chloe's post. Looks fun. Then I opened a different app on my phone. The one connected to every property in my portfolio. I scrolled through until I found what I was looking for. Paradise Bay Resort, Turks and Caicos. The guest list showed. Winters Family Presidential Suite 7 nights $47,000. I smiled and tapped through to the property management system. The next morning my phone rang at 6:15 a.m. Amber. Amber, something terrible has happened. It was Mom, her voice high and panicked. Good morning to you too, I said, setting down my coffee. What's wrong? We've been kicked out. They're making us leave the resort. What? Why? I don't know. The manager came to our room this morning and said there was an issue with our reservation. They're saying we need to vacate immediately. In the background I could hear Chloe crying dramatically and Derek shouting at someone. That's terrible, I said. What kind of issue? Something about the booking being flagged for review. They won't explain it properly. Amber, we've already paid for the entire week. Have you called customer service? Yes. They keep transferring us to different departments. No one will give us a straight answer. I could hear Dad's voice in the background. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? Apparently, the resort staff didn't care who he thought he was. I'm so sorry this is happening, I said. Is there anything I can do to help? I don't know what anyone can do. They're being completely unreasonable. Chloe's voice came through clearly. This is ruining everything. Our whole vacation is destroyed. Maybe try booking somewhere else? I suggested. Everywhere else is booked solid. It's peak season. That's awful. I really wish I could help. I know, sweetie. I know you would if you could. If I could. Like I was some powerless person sitting helplessly while my family faced a crisis. Keep me posted, I said. I hope you can work it out. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and pulled up the Paradise Bay Management dashboard. The Winters family reservation showed a red flag. Guest conduct violation, immediate ejection authorized. I tagged their reservation the night before with a standard violation notice. Nothing illegal, nothing permanent. Just a temporary flag that gave the resort staff authority to ask them to leave. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Worst vacation ever. Loudly crying face, some mistake with the computer system. They won't even let us appeal it. I responded, oh no. That's so frustrating. 20 minutes later, another call. This time it was Dad. Amber, we need your help. Of course, Dad. What can I do? We need to borrow some money. To book another resort. I paused. How much money? Well, everywhere else is significantly more expensive on short notice. We're looking at about $60,000 for the rest of the week. $60,000? I know it's a lot, but this vacation was supposed to be special. It's our anniversary and Chloe and Derek's 5-year anniversary, and we'd already taken time off work. Dad, I don't have $60,000. I know, but maybe you could ask your boss for an advance? Or take out a loan. I stared at my laptop screen, where the Paradise Bay property showed a daily revenue of $340,000. My boss was staring back at me from my own employee photo on the company website. I can try, I said. But Dad, why didn't you guys invite me on this vacation in the first place? Silence. Dad. Well, Amber, you know how Chloe feels about certain things. What certain things? She just thought it might be more relaxing if it was just immediate family. I am immediate family. Of course you are. But you know, with your situation, she was worried about stress levels. My situation? Your financial struggles. Your job problems. She didn't want the vacation to become about helping you or listening to complaints about your life. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. I see. It's not personal, sweetie. Chloe just wanted 1 week where she didn't have to worry about anyone else's problems. Right. Because my existence is a problem. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Dad sighed. Amber, can we focus on the immediate issue? We really need help here. Let me see what I can do, I said. I'll call you back. I hung up and opened Chloe's Instagram again. She'd posted a new story, worst resort ever. They literally kicked us out for no reason. Avoid Paradise Bay at all costs. Pouting face. The story had 200 views already. In the comments, her friends were expressing outrage and solidarity. That's horrible. Sue them. Post this everywhere. Name and shame. I screenshotted the story and forwarded it to my head of PR with a note. Please prepare a response regarding false reviews. Legal may need to get involved. Then I called my assistant. Hi Maya. I need you to pull the guest history for Paradise Bay Resort. The Winters family reservation that was flagged this morning. Of course. What specific information do you need? I want to know if they've caused any actual problems during their stay. Staff complaints, property damage, disturbances. I'll have that for you in 10 minutes. While I waited, I thought about the last family gathering I'd attended. Thanksgiving 6 months ago. Chloe had spent the entire dinner talking about her new house, her husband's promotion, their upcoming vacation plans. When someone asked about my life, she'd interrupted with, "Oh, Amber's still figuring things out. Aren't you, sis?" The dismissal in her voice. The way she'd smiled like she was being kind. Still living in that tiny apartment? Derek had added. Man, I can't imagine not having space to breathe. Different priorities, I'd said quietly. Yeah, like not having any money for priorities, Chloe had laughed. Sorry, that was mean. I just worry about you. She didn't worry about me. She pitied me. And apparently, my presence was such a burden that they'd planned an entire family vacation specifically to exclude me. My phone rang. I have the guest report, she said. The Winters family has been problematic. How so? Multiple noise complaints from other guests. They've been playing music loudly on their terrace past quiet hours. Mr. Derek Winters was reported for inappropriate behavior at the pool bar yesterday, apparently making crude comments to female staff members. Anything else? Mrs. Chloe Winters posted several negative reviews online before the ejection, claiming the food was mediocre and the service was third world level. She also complained that her suite wasn't clean enough, though housekeeping reports show no actual cleanliness issues. So they were legitimately problematic guests. Very much so. The staff had already begun documenting issues for potential action. I hung up and opened my laptop. The guest conduct file for the Winters family was extensive. Noise complaints, staff harassment, false reviews, demanding special treatment. They hadn't been kicked out because of a mysterious computer glitch. They'd been kicked out because they were terrible guests who had no idea how to behave at a luxury resort. I called Dad back. Any luck with the money? He asked immediately. Actually, Dad, I found out something interesting about why you were asked to leave. What do you mean? I have a friend who works in hospitality. She made some calls for me. And apparently you guys were reported for multiple violations. Noise complaints, harassment of staff, posting false reviews. That's ridiculous. We weren't doing anything wrong. Derek was making inappropriate comments to the female bartenders. He was just being friendly. And Chloe was posting negative reviews while she was still a guest. She was just expressing her opinion. Dad, you were kicked out because you were acting like entitled jerks, not because of a computer error. Silence. That's not how it happened. It's exactly how it happened. And now you want me to loan you $60,000 to go be entitled jerks somewhere else. Amber, that's not fair. What's not fair is being called a burden by my own family. What's not fair is being excluded from a family vacation and then being asked to pay for your replacement vacation when you get kicked out for bad behavior. We didn't exclude you. Chloe literally posted family vacation without the burden. With a picture of everyone except me. 847 people liked it. Dad was quiet for a long moment. I didn't see that post. Because you don't follow me on social media. None of you do. You don't know anything about my life because you've decided it's not worth knowing about. Amber. The answer is no, Dad. I'm not taking out a loan to fund your vacation. Figure it out yourselves. I hung up. For the rest of the day my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic calls and texts. Mom calling to ask if I'd reconsidered. Chloe texting long paragraphs about how family should help family. Derek sending a voice message about how disappointed he was in my selfishness. I ignored all of them and focused on work. Azure Coast Hospitality was in the middle of acquiring 3 new properties in Costa Rica. Real problems that required real solutions. That evening, Chloe posted another Instagram story. When your family abandons you in your time of need, broken heart, guess we know who really cares about family. The comments were predictably supportive of her narrative. Your sister should help. Family first. Some people are so selfish. I screenshotted that too and added it to a growing file. The next morning my phone rang again. Unknown international number. Hello. Miss Phillips? This is Marcus Rodriguez, manager at Paradise Bay Resort. Yes. I'm calling regarding the Winters family reservation. They've requested to speak with our ownership group about their ejection from the property. I see. They're claiming they were unfairly targeted and demanding compensation for their inconvenience. They've also threatened legal action and continued negative publicity. What kind of compensation are they requesting? Full refund of their stay, plus additional damages for emotional distress. They're claiming the ejection was discriminatory and that our staff was unprofessional. I lean back in my chair. Mr. Rodriguez, what's your professional assessment of their behavior during their stay? Honestly, they were some of the most entitled, disruptive guests we've had in years. The staff was actually relieved when they left. Document everything. Save all the complaints, all the interactions, all the evidence of their behavior. Of course. But Miss Phillips, they're demanding to speak with ownership. How should I handle that? Transfer them to my legal department. Tell them ownership will review their case and respond appropriately. Understood. After I hung up, I called my head of legal. Jennifer, I need you to handle something for me. The Winters family at Paradise Bay is threatening legal action. What's the situation? They were ejected for multiple conduct violations, and now they're claiming discrimination and demanding compensation. Do we have documentation of the violations? Extensive documentation. Plus they've been posting false and defamatory reviews online. Sounds like they have no case. Should we respond with a cease and desist? Not yet. Let them continue making threats. Document everything. If they want to play hardball, we'll be ready. That afternoon, Chloe called me directly. Amber, we need to talk. Hi, Chloe. This resort situation is getting ridiculous. They're refusing to give us any compensation, and now they're threatening to sue us for defamation. That sounds serious. It's insane. All because Derek was being friendly and I wrote an honest review. Chloe, why are you calling me about this? Because you said you have a friend in hospitality. Maybe she can help us understand what's happening. I don't think there's much to understand. You were disruptive guests, so you were asked to leave. We were not disruptive. We paid $47,000 for that suite. And you were loud, rude to staff and posted negative reviews while you were still a guest. Those reviews were honest. Were they? Or were you just mad that your 5-star suite wasn't 6 stars? Chloe was quiet for a moment. I can't believe you're taking their side. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just stating facts. The fact is that my family is in trouble and you don't care. The fact is that you publicly called me a burden and then expected me to bail you out when your vacation went bad. I never called you a burden. Family vacation without the burden. That was your caption. That wasn't about you. Then who was it about, Chloe? Silence. Who exactly is the burden in our family that you were so happy to vacation without? I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. You meant that my presence ruins things for you. That you're happier when I'm not around. Amber. And you know what? You're right. You are happier without me around. Because when I'm around, you have to pretend to care about someone other than yourself. That's not true. It is true. You've spent years treating me like a charity case, like someone to pity and dismiss. And now that your vacation is ruined, suddenly you need your burden of a sister to help fix it. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the caption. I wanted one vacation where we didn't have to worry about anything. Worry about what? About your situation. Your financial problems. Your job issues. What job issues? You know, the fact that you can't seem to hold down a steady position. I laughed. Chloe, what do you think I do for work? I don't know. Different things. Temp work, maybe. You don't know what I do for work? Well, no. You never really talk about it. Because every time I try, you change the subject or interrupt me. That's not true. Last Thanksgiving I started to tell you about a project I was working on. You cut me off and started talking about your kitchen renovation. I don't remember that. You never remember. Because you don't listen. Chloe was quiet for a long moment. So what do you do for work? It doesn't matter now. Yes, it does. I want to know. Why? So you can judge whether it's good enough? So you can decide if I'm worth including in family events. Amber, please. I'm trying to understand. I looked out my office window at the city skyline. 12 of the buildings in my view were properties I owned. The restaurant where my family ate every Christmas was in a building I'd bought 3 years ago. I run a hospitality company, I said finally. Like hotels. Hotels, resorts, restaurants. We have properties in 15 countries. That sounds nice. It's a billion-dollar company, Chloe. Silence. What? Azure Coast Hospitality. Maybe you've heard of it. Wait. You work for Azure Coast. I don't work for Azure Coast. I am Azure Coast. The silence stretched for almost a minute. Amber, what are you saying? I'm saying I own the company. I built it from nothing. I'm worth about $1.8 billion. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because you live in a tiny apartment. You drive an old car. You never have money for things. I choose to live simply. And I never said I didn't have money. You just assumed I didn't. But we've been worried about you for years. No, you've been judging me for years. There's a difference. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Amber, if you really own this company, then you could help us with the resort situation. How? You could call them. You could explain that we're your family. Chloe, do you want to know something funny? What? I don't need to call Paradise Bay Resort. I already know everything about your stay there. What do you mean? I mean I own Paradise Bay Resort. The phone went so quiet I thought the call had dropped. Chloe, you own the resort? I own the resort where you called me a burden. Where you posted negative reviews. Where Derek harassed my staff. Where you demanded special treatment and complained about everything. Oh my God. You were ejected from my resort for being terrible guests. And then you called me asking for money to go be terrible guests somewhere else. Amber, I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Because you never bothered to learn anything about my life. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. For which part? For calling me a burden? For excluding me from family events? For treating me like a failure for years? Or for asking me to pay for your vacation after you got kicked out of my own resort? All of it. Everything. Amber, I had no idea you were so successful. And if I wasn't successful? If I really was struggling financially? Would you be sorry then? Silence. That's what I thought. Amber, please. Let me make this right. How? I don't know. Tell me how. I looked at my computer screen where the Paradise Bay incident report was still open. Photos of Derek being escorted away from the pool bar. Audio recordings of Chloe screaming at the front desk staff. Reviews she'd posted calling my resort third world and disgusting. Delete the Instagram posts, I said. What? Delete the posts calling Paradise Bay the worst resort ever. Delete the stories about being unfairly treated. Delete anything negative you've posted about my property. Of course. Yes. I'll do that right now. And apologize. To who? To everyone. Post a public apology admitting that you were disruptive guests and that the resort was right to ask you to leave. Amber, that's really embarrassing. Not as embarrassing as being ejected from a resort for bad behavior. But my followers will think. Your followers will think you learned from your mistakes and grew as a person. Unless you'd rather they think you're the kind of person who harasses hotel staff and then lies about it online. Okay, I'll post an apology. And Chloe? Yes. The next time you plan a family vacation, you can either invite your entire family or you can pay for it yourselves. But you don't get to exclude me and then ask for my help when things go wrong. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what you did. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You showed me exactly how much I matter to you. You matter so much. No, I don't. I matter to you now because you found out I'm wealthy. But yesterday I was a burden you were happy to vacation without. That's not true. It's exactly true. And we both know it. I hung up. Within an hour, Chloe had deleted all her negative posts about Paradise Bay. By evening she'd posted a long apology admitting that her family had been difficult guests, and that the resort had acted professionally in a challenging situation. The apology got 23 likes. Much less engagement than her original complaint posts. Dad called that night. Amber, Chloe told me about your company. Did she? Why didn't you ever tell us? I tried to, Dad. Multiple times. But every time I mentioned work, You'd either change the subject or make some comment about me needing to get serious about my career. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I was failing than to actually listen to what I was telling you. You're right. We've been terrible. Yes, you have. How can we fix this? I don't know if you can. Please, Amber. You're our daughter. Our family. Am I? Because for the past 5 years, you've treated me like an embarrassment. Like someone you tolerate out of obligation. That's not how we see you. It's exactly how you see me. Or how you saw me until you found out I was rich. Dad was quiet for a long moment. What would it take for you to forgive us? Time, I said. And proof that you actually want a relationship with me, not just access to my money. We don't want your money. Dad, the first thing you did after finding out about my company was ask Chloe if I could help with the resort situation. Not, let's apologize to Amber. Not, let's figure out how to be better family. You immediately started thinking about how my success could benefit you. He didn't deny it. Call me in 6 months, I said. If you can go 6 months without asking me for anything, without expecting anything, without treating me differently because of my money, then maybe we can start rebuilding. 6 months. 6 months. Dad, if I see any of you posting about having a successful businesswoman in the family, or bragging about your connections to Azure Coast Hospitality, the conversation is over permanently. I hung up and turned off my phone. 3 weeks later, I received a handwritten letter from Mom. No requests for money, no mentions of my business. Just an apology for years of dismissive treatment and a promise to do better. She included a photo from my high school graduation. The 4 of us together before Derek, before the judgment, before I'd become someone they were embarrassed by. I found this in an old album, she wrote. I remember how proud we were that day. I want to feel that way again, not because of your money, but because of who you are. It was a start. 6 months later, I had dinner with my parents. Just the 3 of us. We talked about Mom's book club, Dad's golf game, my recent trip to see the new Costa Rica properties. Normal family conversation. Chloe wasn't there. She'd moved to Florida with Derek, partly for his job and partly, I suspected, because she couldn't face the awkwardness of rebuilding our relationship. He sent a Christmas card though. A simple one that said, "Thinking of you," with a handwritten note. I know I have a lot to make up for. I hope someday you'll let me try. Kept the card. A year after the Paradise Bay incident, I bought a small resort in Vermont. Not for business, just for family. A place where we could vacation together, if we ever got to the point where that was possible again. I named it Burden's Rest. It seemed fitting.